Thank you all for this discussion. And at STPI, you know that we always at the forefront of highlighting the challenges of affordability as well as the economic ability and environmental challenges. So in this context, we always organize such sessions, such workshops, and such discussions that like add up to the agenda that we support the government and also to initiate the discussion in the public sector, private sector, and academia as well. At STBI, we under the Network for Clean Energy Transition, we are working on different themes, and the theme which I am currently looking for, and we are at STBI are looking for, is the low carbon fuel. Last year in 2023, we have conducted an extensive study to address the challenges, especially when we're talking about the hard to abate sectors of Pakistan. We have done some scoping study on the cement sector, and we have identified some of the fascinating facts that there are still opportunities and there's still room for improvement for the private sector, especially when the cement sector, steel sector, hard to abate sectors for that. And in this regard, the low carbon fuel like hydrogen has gained a significant boom recently, and we are here together to find out the solutions that how this low carbon fuel could be a potential source for the hard to abate sectors of Pakistan. And recently, government of Pakistan and NICA has launched their feasibility studies in which they have identified the 13 value chains for the hydrogen fuel. So to get this agenda on the public sector table and the private sector table and the discussion through academia, I wanted a very powerful discussion from all of you, and I hope that we will get some powerful recommendation as well through this dialogue. Before I proceed further, I would request Dr. Abid Suleri, who is the Executive Director of STPI, for officially opening his remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Saleh. Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished panelists who spared your valuable time to join us today to have this very interesting discussion on a very innovative idea of green hydrogen. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, the hydrogen doesn't want to stay isolated and alone in nature. It immediately tries to find a companion. Either it bonds with carbon in case of hydrocarbons, or it bonds with the oxygen to make a molecule of water. And that's where the whole nature of hydrogen atom makes it challenging as well as complicated when we talk of using hydrogen as a fuel. Now, it's not that hydrogen is not being produced today or it's not being used today. Till today, roughly 90 million tons of hydrogen is produced every year, and it's worth around $150 billion of revenue, almost revenue of Exxon. But in order to produce this hydrogen, this 90 million tons, almost 800 million tons of CO2 is being emitted, which is equivalent to the Germany's carbon dioxide emission. And that's where the debate for blue, green, or pink hydrogen is coming, whether it's possible to split this molecule of water or split a molecule of mainly methane so that one can isolate hydrogen. Yes, it is very much possible. But then the second biggest challenge is that in order to do this splitting, the amount of energy that would be required, most of the time it's too high than the hydrogen that is captured. And that's where this, in the lingo, this blue, green, and pink comes. So blue hydrogen, just for the starters and some of the students who are following us, blue hydrogen is a process whereby a molecule of methane is split, and the carbon dioxide and the carbon which is emitted as a process is captured and stored. So if one can minimize the CO2 emission from methane. That sort of process will give us blue hydrogen. Green hydrogen is a process whereby molecule of water is split through hydrolysis, but then it's not the fossil fuel that would provide the energy for this process, but it would be an electricity or energy produced through renewable energy. If it is renewable energy, it is green hydrogen, and if it's nuclear energy, it is pink hydrogen. Again, in theory, it sounds quite easy, but easier said than done. One of the major challenges that takes place is the whole availability of electrolyzers. And if one look at the race in producing electrolyzers, of course, America is there, but then in our region, China and India, they are also trying to produce electrolyzers which are as efficient as possible. Now, again, to give you an idea of the cost of production, if one has to produce hydrogen, 1 kg of hydrogen as it is required, produced today to use in the fertilizer industry or to use in oil refineries, it costs somewhere around $1 per kg, the gray hydrogen. If one has to shift towards blue hydrogen, which is, of course, the question is economy of scale, it's still not commercially viable. But even if we shift to blue hydrogen, the cost would be somewhere $2 to $2.5 per kg. And if one has to go for green hydrogen, the cost would be above $5 per kg. So this cost comparison and its scalability, that makes it, again, extremely difficult to produce it. And then there is another dimension that I wanted to highlight here. In the years of 2000s, 1999, 2000, there was a boom of producing clean hydrogen. And in that boom, billions of dollars of investment that actually got lost when the Japanese and American car makers, they were trying to have fuel cells which could convert hydrogen into energy to run the cars and emitting just water. But that didn't work out. Now there is, again, not only due to the global warming, but also due to the whole American Inflation Reduction Act. There is a boom for hydrogen production, and in America now there is a subsidy to produce green hydrogen, which can amount to $3 per kg if someone has to produce green hydrogen. Now that subsidy is a major incentive, which is actually now giving this boom to different entrepreneurs, to different startups to start producing green hydrogen in America. Right now, there are about 1,000 projects underway, most of them in America, but also in Europe. There is around $320 billion of investment is foreseen in the next 7 years time. And India is actually trying to produce cheap commercial electrolyzers. One of the groups, and I'll invite those of you who are technical experts in this subject, do follow and do understand the model of Greenco. Greenco is an electrolyzer manufacturer in India. And right now, Greenco is in partnership with the Belgian John Cockle, which are world's largest electrolyzers, and they're trying to produce 90% indigenous Indian electrolyzers to produce this green hydrogen. So in today's meeting, I'm sure that the partners of CNET as well as the experts, they will be guiding not only about the vision that Pakistan is following to experiment and to produce green or blue or pink hydrogen, but also the feasibilities and the venues for public-private partnership for this. As I said, that it's the industry that has to come forward. It is the amount of targeted subsidies that we could target to produce this cleaner and greener source of energy. And it is a joint venture with our external partners, especially I can see opportunities in China. If we can have some joint ventures with China for green hydrogen production or for pink hydrogen production, that can be in the medium to long run be one of the major contribution in Pakistan's transition towards clean and green growth, but also STPI, as it is also working on green Belt and Road Initiative and green CPEC. So I would invite the researchers who are working on this greening up CPEC to explore the idea of these joint ventures between Pakistani entrepreneurs and Chinese entrepreneurs for production of electrolyzers that could then produce green or pink hydrogen. And sorry for this longish introduction, but I wanted to set the scene for our experts who I'm sure would be educating us on this very important topic. And I look forward to the recommendations that I hope would be fed to the new government. So I think that now in the run-up to the formation of cabinet, the recommendation that we are collating, we will be able to present them to the new government and the new relevant cabinet ministers so that they can take it further. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, once again for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Dr. Abid has already put the stance on the and agenda for the new government on hydrogen as well. So keeping that agenda forward and to looking for the perspective on the significance of hydrogen, I would request our colleague, Dr. Khalid Waleed, who is the research fellow at STPI, for his insightful presentation. Yes, over to you.
Thank you so much, Saleh. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this very futuristic and pragmatist sort of discussion on green hydrogen for hard-to-abate sector of Pakistan. Dr. Abid has very eloquently set the scene. I would be very brief in that so that we can have this detailed discussion. This presentation would be more focused on how to link hard-to-abate sector with green hydrogen and other sort of issues, and some details on what is the contours of certification and what are different best practices around the globe in that regard. So let me start with hard-to-abate. Hard-to-abate sector, it is a sector where reducing emissions are either very costly or impossible with currently available abatement technology. This sector have one, heavy industries. These can be cement, steel, chemical, etc. And then there is heavy duty transportation, for example, trucking, shipping, aviation. According to World Bank, hard-to-abate sector contributes about approximately 30% of global emissions, and this share is expected to be double in terms of business as usual scenario by 2030, 2050. This is analysis of Pakistan's energy sector emissions. You can clearly see that the industry sector or the manufacturing sector have the largest share in terms of emissions in this regard. So we need to decarbonize our hard-to-abate sector as well. What is the economic feasibility, or what is the link between economic feasibility and climate target in terms of hard-to-abate sector? Well, for rest of the economy, it is pretty simple. There is a straight path that you need some combination of energy efficiency. You can switch to carbon-free energy sources and you get this net zero. But in terms of hard-to-abate sector, you need to have this sort of curvy sort of path where you would have technology constraints. You would have the technology that is available is not matured enough. There is abatement technologies that are too expensive. You have climate challenges, for example, carbon border adjustment mechanisms are coming, and so on and so forth. You need standardization, certifications, regulations, and then efficiency of alternative fuels that would be available, whether they would be efficient enough to fulfill the needs of this sector, because they need very high amount of energy to achieve this net zero initiative. So this is sort of a curvy path. We need to make sense of this part so that this could get economically feasible, and we are attaining our climate targets as well. This is an economic feasibility. In the x-axis, you will see that extreme side, centralized application, then distributed application. On y-axis, you will see that maturity of hydrogen solution. You'll clearly see that centralized applications with higher maturity favors the hard to abate sector in terms of usage of hydrogen as compared to the electrification. Electrification can be used for residential heating, transportation sector, so on and so forth. But in terms of hard to abate sector, hydrogen makes an economic sense, economically feasible. There is a dilemma in hard to abate sector. For heavy industry, particularly cement, steel, chemicals, etc., fossil fuel remain the cheapest option till now. Industrial heat is extremely high heat that is required for these processes. Around 10% of global CO2 emissions come from combustion required to produce this high temperature heat. In terms of heavy duty transportation, no commercially viable way to compete with fossil fuel density or portability is available. Second is it requires improvement in battery density or in alternative fuels. The most promising alternative fuels obviously is hydrogen, biofuel, or synthetic fuels. These fuels require substantial process redesign and are not yet produced at scale, which was mentioned by Dr. Abid in his opening remarks as well. These are the spectrum of hydrogen. I'm really sorry for missing the pink hydrogen that Dr. Abid mentioned. There are gray hydrogen, which is produced through gasification, through fossil fuels. Blue hydrogen, same process, but it is linked with or integrated with carbon capture. Then the topic of today's event, green hydrogen, it is produced through electrolysis using renewable energy. So green hydrogen with hard to abate sector, that can be a potential path for net zero. This is again a very basic green hydrogen value chain. You use a renewable energy electrolysis process, you process it, and you the portability is ensured with shipping trucks, piped infrastructure, or you can store it for the usage in heavy industry, heavy duty transportation, shipping, aviation, others. This is a projection. In 2020, about 87.1 million tons of hydrogen was produced. It is projected that the demand of hydrogen would be about 7-fold high in 2050, about 613 million tons. This is very basic green hydrogen process. You start with renewable energy generation, you use electrolyzers, distribute and storage of hydrogen, and then you use it for end users for net zero emissions. Benefits and uses, it can be used as feedstock for petrochemical industry, fuel for hard to abate sectors. It generates about 1000 degrees centigrades without emitting CO2. Fuel cells, it reacts with oxygen to produce electricity. The only byproduct is water vapors. Potential for Pakistan, well, for domestic production, sector coupling, which is very important. As you all know that the wind sector, wind power always faces curtailment issues in Pakistan because we have way more capacity than our needs. So we can couple this power generating sector, particularly wind sector, with hydrogen production. That would make economic sense. And then we can use it for hard to abate sector, alternative to gas depletion. And then obviously far flung is we can export it. In terms of enabling environment, we need national hydrogen strategy. We need policy priorities, right? Guarantees of origin, governance system, and enabling policies, international cooperation, and certification. In terms of the linkage between net zero, hydrogen, and hard to abate sector, we need to consider these 3 E's. I always say economics, energy, and environment. The hard to abate sector need economically feasible hydrogen as efficient energy alternative And the important thing is that these energy alternatives should certify environmental savings to achieve net zero. Without that, it makes no sense for hard to abate sector to shift to these alternate fuels. This will require long and integrated planning based on international best practices. And one of the best practice is the recently announced declaration of intent at COP28. This declaration on hydrogen was endorsed by 37 countries. Pakistan was not part of it, but it aims for mutual recognition of hydrogen certification schemes to foster a global, renewable, and low carbon hydrogen market. It aims to accelerate the development of technical solutions for mutual certification, recognition, collaboration under IPHE initiative or TCP Tech Cooperation Program initiative. It plans to assist and assign government experts to IPHE and hydrogen TCP to advance solutions for hydrogen certification schemes. Again, it considers additional measures for mutual certification recognition, aligning with global standards like ISO's GHG emission methodology for hydrogen. Lastly, it commits to annually monitor progress in cooperation for mutual recognition of hydrogen certification schemes. So the focus or the global shift is towards collaboration, towards cooperation in this very particular thing that is hydrogen, because it is a very tech incentive and I would say capital incentive sort of measure that fosters net zero. In terms of international partnerships or cooperation, there are two initiatives. First is international partnerships for hydrogen and fuel cells in economy, IPHE. It was launched. It launched an initiative known as H2DEIA, which promotes about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in global hydrogen economy, so that the developing countries or underdeveloped countries, they are also supported via financial incentive, via tech inclusion, so that they can produce green hydrogen as well. Second is Hydrogen Tech Cooperation Program. It accelerates hydrogen implementation and widespread utilization to optimize environmental protection, improve energy security, promote economic development, as I have mentioned earlier, the combination of economy, energy, and environment. It has three pillars. First is collaborative research development portfolios. It aims for production, storage, integrated hydrogen systems, hydrogen integration in infrastructure, and end-use devices. Second is analysis portfolio, which provides technical progress and optimization market preparedness. It also provides support in political decision-making so that there is a political discourse around hydrogen policies, global energy economic systems analysis as well. Last pillar is awareness, where it supports information dissemination, safety concerns regarding hydrogen, and lastly, the global outreach for hydrogen initiatives. In terms of hydrogen certification, IPHE is the main body in the emerging global hydrogen economy. Robust tradable certification schemes are required. It focuses particularly on enabling the implementation of government policies, evidence their sustainability attributes such as carbon footprint via hydrogen, how to achieve net zero initiatives. It also creates transparency for consumers and for international bodies so that the hard to abate sector or private sector can show its energy savings or environmental savings. Allow users to signal demand for hydrogen based on its sustainability credentials. And lastly, it also creates some sort of a trust between prospective importers and exporters, which is very far-flung for Pakistan, but it is necessary to have in our policy roadmap as well. This is sort of a scheme or a roadmap for certification or hydrogen certification if we want to ensure environmental savings or a path towards net zero. It starts from jurisdiction-specific requirements. I think MD Nika would be highlighting more about it. Attribution covered by the schemes, the carbon footprint, what is the content of renewable energy in it, use of land and water in the process of hydrogen manufacturing and production? What are different social impacts? What would be the chain of custody in terms of energy, in terms of hydrogen demand and production as well? What would be the scope and boundary condition of certification schemes, certification issuing, oversight and supervision? And lastly, what would be the governance of this scheme? This is a whole labeling mechanism. That's why I think NICA makes more sense because it has the background to issue labels for certain regulatory interventions. What is the journey towards net zero hydrogen production for hard to abate sector? We need to have need assessment, bankability, international cooperation, regulatory framework, certification, supply chain issues, and public-private integration. That's where I will leave you because the experts would talk about these issues as well. So we can have this efficient sort of hydrogen production or green hydrogen production so that we our hard to abate sector not only achieve net zero, but also we can make a bankable or economic case for them as well. Thank you so much. Back to you, Saleh.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Khalid. Especially you have setting the scene for the enabling environment for the private sector. And also you talked about the standardization, partnerships, and you also paved the way for the net zero for the hard to abate sectors, that how could they achieve this. And especially when we are talking about the hard to abate sectors, we have fortunately steel sector representation with us, Mr. Abu Bakr Ismail. Like when we are talking about the hard to abate sectors and when we are talking about the steel sector specifically, the steel sector is mainly relying on the coal for the generation, for the power generation. So like my question would be to explore how do you see that the green hydrogen could be a good source for Pakistan steel industry especially, and how you can see the opportunities and challenges when you're adopting this if the policy goes through, and also how you can enhance the traditional blast furnace efficiency through green hydrogen. Yeah, over to you, Mr. Abu Bakr Ismail.
Assalamu alaikum to all the panelists and attendees. So basically, we all believe that we have to work towards the net zero. And just I want to clarify some points related to steel industry first. That with respect to production process, obviously there are two production processes. One is related to the primary steel making that we have done from the ore, and in this we use the blast furnace and coal usually to produce the iron. And the second process is secondary steel making, that is through the scrap, and in this we use electric furnaces to produce the iron. And when we see the SBTI net zero path for this steel industry, so they have focused that the two paths. Obviously, one is with respect to replace the coal with the hydrogen, and the second thing is the circularity, towards moving towards circularity, that more and more steel can be reused so that emissions can be reduced. And if I can show that, just for the example, is almost, you can say, if from the primary steel making, the secondary steel making is 70% less carbon intensive. So just from the background, so first thing in Pakistan, you can say it's fortunate that our all private steel industry is using the secondary steel making process. So they are already in the circular economy business. We are producing steel from the scrap, and we are using electrical furnace. So already you can say from the primary steel making, it is 70% less carbon emission process. So this is the first thing that I want to highlight with respect to, especially for Pakistan. And this we can obviously on the different forums, we can highlight as well that this is the one positive thing that steel industry have in Pakistan. So second thing is obviously we have to reduce our current footprint as well. In this, there are obviously when you are using the electricity as a main product, so renewables can be more, you can say, a good approach, because converting the hydrogen and then again the electricity will be less efficient process. So first focus of steel industry is to have electricity resources from the solar, wind, and also we are working towards biomass as well, maybe from energy crops or residue crops, के इन सब डिफरेंट तरीकों से जो है वो आप बिजली इस्तेमाल करें और अपनी जो आप ग्रीन स्टील की तरफ आहिस्ता आहिस्ता मूव हो, और मे बी एट वन टाइम वी हैव on the process of 100% green steel. And similarly with respect to for some, because the main topic is hydrogen and we are talking about the industries as well. So I just want to highlight some points that obviously जितनी ज्यादा उम्मीदें हाइड्रोजन से हैं उतनी शायद चीजें उसके अंदर अगर मैं प्रैक्टिकल उस चीज को देखूं तो शायद वो उतना प्रैक्टिकल नहीं है हर एक सेक्टर के साथ। चैलेंजेस जैसे कि डॉक्टर वलीद ने अपने बताया भी है अपनी प्रेजेंटेशन के अंदर भी, और इससे पहले भी डॉक्टर आबिद साहब ने भी बताया कि अभी जो हमारे पास सबसे बड़ा इशू है ऑब्वियसली इकोनॉमिक्स। इकोनॉमिक्स आपके पास जो है एक बहुत बड़ा इशू है कि जिससे आप स्टील अगर प्रोड्यूस कर रहे हैं और आपने बेचना है, और अगर आज ग्रे हाइड्रोजन $1 की है और ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन $5 की, इट इज वेरी एक्सपेंसिव ऑब्वियसली टू शिफ्ट एट द मोमेंट। बट विद रिस्पेक्ट टू पाथ, अगर मैं उस पर सिर्फ अगर कुछ नंबर्स कोट करूं कि आपके पास अभी जैसे हमने COP 28 की बात की कि दुबई में उन्होंने 180 मिलियन टन का टारगेट कोट किया है कि नेक्स्ट डेकेड वी विल मूव टुवर्ड 180 मिलियन। बट अगर हम जस्ट जरा सा पास्ट को उठा के देखें तो जितने भी टारगेट्स अगर मतलब इट जस्ट अगर आप दिसंबर 23 में ब्लूमबर्ग एनईएफ का आर्टिकल इसके ऊपर आया हुआ है कि आपके पास जितने भी कमिटेड प्रोजेक्ट्स थे उसमें से लेस देन मतलब 1/10 इट्स अ रेशो के 10 में से शायद एक प्रोजेक्ट भी फोकस जितनी भी कंट्रीज है उन्होंने उसके ऊपर इन्वेस्टमेंट सिर्फ इतने कम प्रोजेक्ट्स के ऊपर हुई है। एक तो ये इम्पोर्टेंट है कि आपके पास उस तरीके से चीजें मूव नहीं कर रही जिस तरीके से जितने टनेज को आप कोट कर रहे हैं, जितनी प्रोजेक्ट्स को आप कोट कर रहे हैं, उस तरीके से ये चीजें आगे नहीं बढ़ रही। 2023 के अंदर ब्लूमबर्ग हैज कोटेड दैट सिर्फ 2 गीगावाट्स ऑफ इलेक्ट्रोलाइजर के ऑर्डर्स जो है ना वो दुनिया में हुए, जबकि इंस्टॉल कैपेसिटी मतलब सप्लाइड कैपेसिटी जो थी वो 33 गीगावाट्स थी। और जितने भी बड़े बड़े इलेक्ट्रोलाइजर स्टार्टअप्स हैं पूरे यूरोप में, इनकी शेयर प्राइसेस अप टू 95% गिर गई 2023 में कि यार जो आप एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे थे कि मुझे इतना बिजनेस मिलेगा दुनिया में से, इतना काम मिलेगा, इतनी इन्वेस्टमेंट आएगी, और वो आई नहीं। और उस इन्वेस्टमेंट से जो आपने बड़ी बड़ी फैक्ट्रियां भी लगा ली कि मतलब यू कैन सप्लाई 33 गीगावाट बट द ऑर्डर्स आर ओनली 2 गीगावाट। सो दिस इज द रियलिटी एट द बैक एंड के जो चाहे डेवलप कंट्रीज भी जो इस पे काम करने की फोकस कर रहे हैं, बट ये इस तरीके से हो नहीं पा रहा। जहां तक मेरी जो थोड़ी सी रिसर्च है इसके अंदर जो फोकस करना चाहिए वो ऑन साइट यूजेज के ऊपर फोकस करना चाहिए रेदर देन द ट्रांसपोर्टेशन। ट्रांसपोर्टेशन के अंदर भी अगर हम वी नो के जस्ट लाइक फिजिक्स के लिक्विड हाइड्रोजन और इसको ट्रांसपोर्ट करना और वो वॉल्यूम वाइज जस्ट 22% ऑफ एनर्जी जो है वो LNG के बराबर आपके पास एक हाइड्रोजन सेम वॉल्यूम के अंदर रखती है। सो उसको ट्रांसपोर्ट करना ज्यादा चैलेंज है, लेकिन खास तौर पे वो इंडस्ट्रीज जो कि डायरेक्ट यूज करती हैं हाइड्रोजन अपने प्रोसेस में और मीथेन को स्प्लिट करके और बाकी कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड को ऑब्वियसली हवा के अंदर ओपनली छोड़िए, तो वहां आपके पास बहुत अच्छा ऑप्शन है कि वो ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन बनाएं और उसको अपने प्रोसेस में डायरेक्ट यूज करें। तो आपके पास ओवरऑल जो है इकोनॉमिकली इट कैन बी मोर वायबल इन फ्यूचर एज कम्पेयर टू ट्रांसपोर्टेशन, बिकॉज ट्रांसपोर्टेशन के जो चैलेंजेस हैं उसमें मतलब एज पर the researches available on the internet, it is very difficult to transport, and even if we can say that we can export from Pakistan, I think it's not maybe possible due to its physical or chemical characteristics. So I will close my point here that again obviously it's for the overall industrial sector, it is very important to shift, but we have to specify some critical processes that where green hydrogen will be more viable as compared to direct burning in the furnaces maybe. But when we come to Pakistan, that this is a good news that we already in the circular business, that we are not polluting the air as China and USA and India is doing from the primary steel making. So this is it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good to know that you are already in the circularity business as well. And we completely understand the challenges that the steel industry is currently have, and we know that decarbonization is the agenda that needs an economic case and economic viability, and the challenges you highlighted needs innovation, research, and with this, I think that academia perspective is more important, that what they think on these grounds on hydrogen as a fuel. So I would request Dr. Irfan Ahmed Gondal, since academia or the research arms are the innovation hubs for the new ventures, like we are talking about the hydrogen in Pakistan. So how do you see what's your research is all about on this perspective, and how do you see the infrastructure of hydrogen could be feasible in the Pakistan context? Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Let me start with my own history on hydrogen. I'm in this field since 2002 when I did my master's thesis. And then when I went for the PhD to International Center for Hydrogen Energy Technologies in Istanbul, the CEO, the first statement he made to me is that hydrogen is a problem. You have problems with its production, you have problems with its distribution, and you have problems with its storage. And at that time, in 2010, he also mentioned that there were no usable devices that would use hydrogen to complete our work, whatever we wanted to do. There were no fuel cell vehicles or something like that. So continuing on this, since I am more concerned with the infrastructure of hydrogen, what we see that we will be able to produce hydrogen. If green hydrogen we want to produce, the first thing is that how we will be able to transmit it, because there are only three methods. We can transport it through the pipelines, and it can be mixed with the hydrogen with the natural gas to transport it, because dedicated hydrogen pipelines, they are very expensive, and you cannot at this moment produce it. But even if we do transport it through the pipelines, there are many physical and chemical properties that would affect its, you can say, the material. Because hydrogen is very reactive with metals, it causes embrittlement, and finally it cracks the pipes. So these are the infrastructure issues regarding the distribution or transportation of hydrogen. And when we go to its storage, I think it was the only storage available at now is pipeline storage is very reduced. And you have to store it in salt caverns, which I don't think we find it too many storage places in Pakistan. And then what we can say is the electrolysis process. Before coming to this event, I just rang up the general manager of Ecto Cement to know how in reality, or how a cement factory, what is the energy mix of a cement factory. So what they told me that for their day-to-day running, what they are using is coal is almost 450 tons per day, and they have almost 350,000 units per day of electricity. So if you do a simple maths, what we get is that 450 tons of coal, it translates into 9,000 tons of hydrogen if you want an equivalent energy output. And when we see this, the 9,000 tons of hydrogen, how much electrolyzers or what amount of electricity would you require to generate this thing? So if this I calculate, we need 2,000 electrolyzers of, this is 10 megawatt each, 2,000 electrolyzers of 10 megawatt to produce this much amount of hydrogen. And this is just for 1 day of production. And how much does this electrolyzer cost? It is almost 1.5 million US dollars per kilowatt. So this is the situation on ground. You need to have so many electrolyzers just for one factory. And I don't know how we'll be able to produce so much hydrogen. It's a fanciful idea. We believe in it, that it's going to work. But for now, I don't think that it is feasible, nor our infrastructure is able to sustain this or is able to support this hydrogen production initially. But since I think it is also a chicken and egg problem, that unless you start with something, you have to have some application, and then you have to have some support for driving those applications. So we need to move in this direction, but it will be a very slow process. So that is from my side.
Thank you, Dr. Irfan, for your extensive, you highlighted your research on the hydrogen fuel and the possibility and prospects of hydrogen as a fuel taken into the hard to abate sectors. I guess we have like identified challenges and some opportunities, and we are here together to find out the solutions, especially for hard to abate sectors or hydrogen as a fuel. And National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority has recently launched their pre-feasibility study on hydrogen. So like I wanted to request Dr. Sardar Mozam that if he wanted to highlight how the government is looking at that and on the policy making, or like in perspective of hard to abate sectors, how he could see how the organization could see the problems or the challenges could be addressed through the public sector. Yeah, over to you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I think, first of all, I would like to thank SDPI for organizing this session and inviting such a learned panel. I think it's a very informative as well as, I think, thought-provoking session that we can see some of these challenges, I think, being highlighted. And I can also seriously look into that aspect that being inside the government, what aspects we look into, and then from the different industry, academia, or research standpoint of view, what are some of the aspects that we review from that side? And I think more from the policy perspective, where I come from, with the things we have to deal with, and looking at overall the multidisciplinary perspective, I think that also gives me a different blend of understanding, like what we are trying to do and what is exactly, I think, we are looking into it. I think a lot of our analysis, especially even mine as well, will be constrained with kind of understanding that I have, or the knowledge or the depth of knowledge which may we come up with, that affects our sort of different perspectives in that. So I think primarily when we were working on this pre-feasibility study on green hydrogen, we started in early 2001, and at different forums when we were working, we were looking at some of these areas where we have been looking into with some of the German experts, with some experts from Pakistan, the regulatory side, and a lot of these challenges. We have seen this very big concern. And I think we acknowledged and understood it that if you look at from the price perspective, I think most of it is right. It's not feasible. The 13 supply chain scenarios of that time, I'm not saying of 2023, but I think of that time when we were looking at all of these, with all the techno-economic analysis, with all the kind of data we had from different countries, our own analysis, our own feasibilities, that was not making sense at that time. But over the period of time, I think it's not a long time, maybe less than 1 year time period. As of today, we can claim that it makes, and we have been discussing with the industrial players, and we already have one of the projects, such as the Oracle Power. It's already in the commissioning process. So if that is not making the economic sense, why such a huge investment is coming to the country? So that's the basic question. Just framing it for the industry, for the academia, for researchers, like why they are putting so much money into it. If I accept all the arguments which I just said, if they're right, I think nobody's going to invest this money. I think along with that, we also see another aspect that globally, even UNIDO, Korean government, some of these others, they are Saudis. There are green hydrogen projects going on, for example, in Egypt, in Morocco, Oman, Saudi Arabia, they are working on green hydrogen. A big investment goes into that area. For example, Koreans are spending or investing $1 billion. I think we have seen the same interest in this region, because if they are producing green hydrogens, the water is saline. If we are producing green hydrogen, we have fresh water. Now, the question which we are facing at this moment is that high prices. I think we can see that when the renewables, especially solar or wind, when it started, what kind of feed-in tariff or the policy mechanism that was offered by the German at that time. And I think that helped towards the economies of scale, that this is the future we have to look into. And I think as of today, we can see the commercial projects of solar or wind somewhere around 4 cents per kilowatt hour. So I think this is where we see that the policy frameworks helps us to catalyze, to attract, to incentivize, and to develop mechanisms around where we can make our investments, and also we can make these technologies reachable to our consumers as well. So I think that is one side of it. It's just a matter of like how much information do we have, like from government standpoint of view, where we just negotiating, discussing at different levels, we altogether gets a different perspective. I think another aspect which I really want from a policy standpoint of view is that, is it the government money going into the hydrogen generation? Is it like government through PSDPs or through some of their own investments, we are putting our money into it? Or we are sort of looking for foreign direct investments, that people or anyone who wants to generate, come in, and if you want to generate, go ahead. Are we going to give them some securities, some sovereign guarantees, some kind of these mechanisms? I think that is a question mark. That what will be the offtake? I think that is the question mark. If somebody comes in, generates hydrogen, the question is it government's responsibility to buy all this hydrogen? I think these are some of the questions that we are frightened with, that earlier take and pay contract mechanisms, they were the challenges for us. If you look at the sector, I think that is the challenge we have faced. But when we look into the overall scenario, the kind of interest, we can seriously look into that dimension, that there are more prospects. For example, if the gray hydrogen costs around $1, we know that green hydrogen also comes around now $1.03. And that even further with economies of scale, I think it can go further down. Now the question, I think, is also, when there was renewable resources coming in, solar was discovered and implemented long ago, mid-80s. And then by the time it's become available on everyone's house, and even in number of areas, it's easily available with everyone. And now it's not a strategic advantage, just a plug and play thing. It's inevitable at that time. And I think we can see in coming years, the hydrogen will be inevitable. To me, if you ask me, as far as I know, the way I see it, I think it's just like another thing that will happen. We cannot stop it, because the way we look into that direction, yes, there are challenges. Yes, there are issues. Electrolysis process, how many electrolyzers are needed. Means a lot of these details yet to be decided. But the question is, that is something inevitable that will happen. That's what my understanding is. Not that I have like a PhD like in hydrogen, but just my own experience or kind of the work I've been doing in all these years. So I can feel that, and I can tell you from different analysis that is something we can see as a future. And there is no doubt about it. Especially when we talk about the challenges of intermittency with the solar, with the wind. So a lot of these provides us this opportunity to look into that dimension. Second, energy density, which comes with, say, for example, in transport sector with EVs. Can hydrogen replace it? Yes. So in industry, when we are looking into these different aspects, which is we are saying hard to abate, then again, the question is like, can hydrogen replace it? I mean, even in the steel industry, I think recycling or the circular economy kind of aspect, I think definitely 64% less than means just producing from the scratch. But again, that's all about the process we are talking about. Even if you look into the where the steel goes most into, if we are going to change our building designs, building styles, a lot of that material, the steel will be the primary thing. And if that is the primary thing, which is if its life cycle analysis is way far less emitting. So I think we can see there is a huge potential for steel for the vertical growth in the cities. So I think how we are making it, how we are recycling it, I mean, a lot of these things comes into play. And that's how we are trying to understand that in any sector where it's hard to abate, I think this is where the important thing comes in. Like, what are the policy tools available with us? Like, how we can address. Why I'm means relating it with other renewables, because it's a basic understanding. For example, renewable portfolio standards. We all means if a company producing 100 watts from the coal, and we are setting up a renewable portfolio standards for them, like in next 3 years, out of 100, our policy is 50% should come from the renewable. We don't know, like you put solar, you put wind, it's a renewable portfolio standards. And then we gradually shift them towards that. So same goes with that, like, can we set up some renewable portfolio standard kind of policy tools into that mechanisms? What are the other countries doing in the region? So I think that is primarily the important thing. At this moment, if you ask me, sort of leading some of the initiatives on the hydrogen in the country, with other integrated with other ministries, because petroleum has the lead, and we are working and supporting them on that. And I think that primarily the challenge which we are facing, like there are different countries coming up. I mean, if we are looking, we don't want to miss the whole, the train which we earlier was losing. Primarily, question is that do we need a sort of a mission or a target? With this much we will be producing by this time. Second, do we need a policy framework? Or do we need a strategy? Or any sort of guidelines like how we are going to deal with this whole thing? So I think primarily these are the questions when we look from the very bird eye view perspective, like, so going into that direction, what exactly we are looking for. I think the second important aspect is then once you set your policy question right, and then a lot of these details comes into play, like how you are going to design it. And these are the design questions. Then we have to deal with, I think, if it's just about, as Dr. Saab said, 2,000 electrolyzers, I think that doesn't matter at all. I mean, we can talk about 10,000, no issues. So the question is, can we set up this whole ecosystem around it? And we can see this, that it's not a challenge. It's all how we can develop government as enabler, provide a level playing field for the investors to come in and play their role. I think the second, I mean, this is more of a, governance aspect, like, and then I think we are also diligently working that there is this whole debate of investors coming in, and they are facing this challenge, like how to deal with the federal government and the provincial government and the ministries. And so we recently held this discussion session where we had interprovincial and interministerial dialogue on hydrogen, and there was a brief discussion on a lot of these aspects. And I think we definitely see a single window platform, that how we can, expedite it with giving a high priority. I think that is what all we are talking about from the supply side. That if we set this target, we need this much of the green hydrogen by this time. I think then the question comes in, like, where the investments will come from, what kind of incentives will be given, how we are going to provide the land, what kind of other incentives will be there, maybe some tax incentives, a number of these aspects. How we are going to provide them electricity, what kind of electricity will be provided, are they bringing their own hybrid electricity, hydrogen and wind together, or we have to curtail electricity from maybe Ghazi Barota, Qaid-e-Azam Solar, a number of other areas, if it's government projects, or if it's some others, for example, how they're going to get their electricity from that. The cheaper the price of electricity, the more feasible the green hydrogen. So it's all about the curtailment, one. Second important aspect is that number of hours of operations of electrolyzers. Is it the solar, so it means it's just like 8 hours? Is it the hybrid where we have solar and wind, and then the number of hours will be different? So a lot of these dimensions are there to be addressed, and how we are going to sort of structure it, design it. What we will do with that electricity when, say, for example, for some reason, we are not producing hydrogen. So that is, these are very different set of questions that comes across. What will be the settlement of lands? Who will providing them the land? What are the areas? So I think these are all those number of questions that fits into that bigger question mark, like this much to be generated, produced by this time. So I think these are some of the aspects which we can look from that dimension. Another thing which is very important for us to understand at this point is from the demand side. What is the offtake? Whoever is generating hydrogen, green hydrogen, who will buy it? Is it the government responsibility to procure? Maybe yes. Why yes? We can do the blending with the natural gas, with the gas pipelines. How much feasible that option is, that's a question mark, requires the feasibility. Aviation fuel, yes, possibility. In other sectors, there are so many areas we can look into. In the transport sector, in the fleets, in a number of areas, we can see there is a potential. But does it make economic sense? We don't know. At this stage, I think clearly, this is a question mark, like that on the supply side, when we structure this whole transaction, the question will be, what is the price of 1 kg of hydrogen, or the price of 1 MMBTU of hydrogen? And that price determines like what will be the deeper penetration in the hard to abate sectors. Other than that, if we are talking about this question, I think it's too early to think like it will not work, it will work, how we are going to deal with this thing. One. So on the offtake, I think one of the major thing which for me, and I think I'm very much interested, maybe SDPI and other colleagues can look into that. And like, what are the areas for its demand, where it can create demand? What are the areas we're really interested? Like, we are more interested. And I think this really tells us or gives us a hint, like, no worries. This much, it's all local. We can locally absorb it. For example, green ammonia, just like the storage mechanism. And I think the fertilizers can definitely is one of the areas that it can be used. Question is, do we have the cost benefit analysis scenario or any substitution mechanisms in place? Like, if we are already importing something, if we are generating our own, what is the offset mechanisms? That kind of things. So I think these are also further question marks when you go deeper into that side. But lastly, I think when we look into the other countries, especially in case of Oman, in case of Saudi Arabia, in India, in other countries, I think Europeans, Germans, especially Europe, Korea, Chinese, this is where there is a huge demand. And we can see that their demand already, there are projections that there will be more demand to it. They are signatory to different international agreements, and then they have to fulfill these commitments. So I think now the question mark is that can we strike a deal with them, like this much we are producing and we want you to buy this? So a lot of these things are sort of a matchmaking kind of a process, like how we are going to deal with that. And I think these two dimensions, like either our domestic demand for the green hydrogen, especially for its offtake, and then the international demand, like how we can produce it. And then I think then Dr. Khalid Waleed's question comes in, like the certification mechanisms comes into play, that if it's internationally needed. So the question is how we can deal with that. And that is the next step, I think. But we are very far from that level yet, that all the way goes into that, but long way to go. And I think that gives us a sense that international markets will definitely look into that kind of things, because if you're talking about a carbon price, if we are talking about cap and trade mechanisms, if we're talking about carbon markets, definitely that will require some certain kind of instruments, incentives that will demand that this should be taken into account. So I think this is overall kind of understanding that even the more, even our local investors are also considering this as an option, because they also see the economies of scale, the price of electrolyzers, a lot of other dimensions helping them to make it feasible by 2025. But if you start any project as of today, it will take 2 to 3 years time period that the first unit of green hydrogen will be produced. It's not just like, overnight you're going to produce. So this is how I think my understanding is, given being exposed to different discussions. But I think we definitely look into that aspect, that it should be the foreign direct investment coming into the country. And then I think we should deal it in a way that all what we have done in the past, we should carefully dealt with some of these, how we are going to provide the sovereign guarantees, mechanisms of offtake, and these aspects should be carefully. And I think we'll definitely ensure that we will take into account some of these things and don't repeat some of these things which have been done in the past, and make it in a way different fashion this time. So we are already working on this, formulating some sort of document which will instruct. It can be a policy, it can be strategy, it can be mission, or it can be anything, that how we are going forward with that. And I think especially when we realized, especially my team at NICA, and I think my colleagues here are sitting with us, we were kind of timely judging all this, like when is the right time to throw the study out for the audience, and then look into the interest and create that, sense in the industry and overall. And I think this was the right time. We realized that let's launch it. And I think we were successful in terms of developing this urgency and this kind of interest across the board. That now there is more interest, and it's been discussed across different sectors. And there will be more things coming up in coming days on that. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. Dr. Sardar has definitely highlighting the significance of a regulatory framework. Without this, the enabling environment for the hydrogen couldn't be possible. And he also talked about the potential areas like the aviation industry, the industrial sector, as well as the transport sector, where we can see the hydrogen potential. And without the cost benefit analysis, that couldn't be possible. And for the country like Pakistan, so there would be a good economic case to establish that agenda. And I believe that Ms. Naheed Mehman is with us, who can shed light on that prospect, on the regulatory prospect, and as a pioneer of green hydrogen project in Pakistan. what I would like to intervene, that what type of challenges and opportunities do you foresee when you were implementing that project, and also what partnerships or collaborations you are looking for in that context to expedite your the agenda. Yeah, over to you, Ms. Naeed Maiman. She is the CEO of Oracle Power. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. I apologize for not being present throughout this. I'm sure what has been a very important discussion. I'm not in the country, and I have been sort of in other meetings as well. So I'll just try to come in, and जो आपने मुझसे अभी सवाल पूछे हैं, based on that, maybe I can throw some light on. You asked our perspective, or what we perhaps have seen. So let me just begin by saying that we have tapped into what we believe to be an opportunity. And that's what the private sector will always focus on. So we believe that the production of hydrogen and any other related molecules, and I'll just say related molecules because Sardar साहब बात कर रहे थे aviation की, transport की, जो मैंने थोड़ा सा in and out meeting में सुन रही थी. So those are all related molecules to the basic green hydrogen once it is produced. So if we just think about the opportunity for the application of all those related molecules, it is staggering, globally staggering. So as an investor, we have seen this opportunity to be only on its way up. And that is why we have come in. We have made substantial investments. We have de-risked what we believe to be a very big and prospective project by substantially analyzing and understanding the landscape in Pakistan with respect to technology, availability of resource, as well as the demand that we feel is in the proximity of where we are setting up our project. So हमें तो एक opportunity नजर आई, and that is what has sort of made us begin and initiate the development of the project, and we believe that the opportunity is large enough and only viable if the project is developed on a substantial scale. So our intention and our analysis is based on a large scale effort, and that's what we're looking at. And when I speak about the opportunity, you can talk about the CABM, the energy transition globally. You can think about the sort of the aviation industry, the transport industry, large industry across the globe, etc., and the entire transition that you're talking about. So as far as the demand is concerned, there is absolutely no doubt about this transition taking place. From gray to green, there might be a pit stop at blue, but the green will happen. And that's what we eventually think is the direction that the world is traveling in. And for Pakistan not to travel in a similar direction when the time is right may probably not fare very well with respect to the growth of this industry. The other point that I would like to make is because there was some discussion around cost, pricing, and competitiveness. There are countless reports out there and comparative analysis which refer to the global price per kg, and whether you say MMBTU, but let's just say per kg because that's the most normal way of referring to the price of hydrogen. There is an entire range of what competitive means today. And competitive today, there was a report by the World Economic Forum, which was published in December 2023, and that gives the entire spectrum of the possible pricing of, not possible, but the projected and confirmed pricing of announced in construction and to be announced projects, when I say which are going to start construction. So the range is anything between $1.7 to $2 a kg, going up to $6 to $7 a kg. That is the spectrum of what the price could be. I'm not going to speak to the price of ammonia at this point in time, although that is a molecule which would be perhaps the most easily used and produced and distributed across the world in the first stage of transition. So competitiveness obviously means that you need to be, in the spectrum close to your market. One of the key things to understand in this from our understanding and our work so far is that bankability has a lot to do with distance. And when you transport this molecule at any price, the key consideration is how far are you going to be? And just like any other energy molecule, be it LNG or oil or the hydrocarbon world that we've all lived in for the last century or whatever, bankability has all been about transportability. How do you move it? When LNG started moving in the 90s or before, and I think it was Kawasaki at that point when they started to move LNG, it was very hard to move it. Now, no one even thinks about how LNG moves. LNG just moves around the world. So hydrogen will also eventually get there, and it's not going to be too far off. That's what we have understood, and we believe that that is the way it's going to move. But so the bankability idea and transportability idea means that you need to transport hydrogen or related molecules to markets close by. And that's what we believe, that being in Pakistan and producing this molecule, you're tapping into the regional market. If you're sitting in Japan, you will not go out and buy your green ammonia from Argentina or somewhere else. It is very, very far away, and the distance is not bankable. So in terms of bankable distances, between 6,000 to 10,000 kilometers can be very bankable for molecules like this. So and there's another point, energy security. What that means is that obviously any one country, be it Japan or Korea or Singapore, any country, they're not going to bank on buying all these molecules from just one country, which basically means that countries will just become a part of the supply chain, and Pakistan has a huge opportunity to become a part of the supply chain for these molecules. So that means that you can be, so they'll buy some from Oman for $2 a kg, and they'll buy some from Pakistan for $3 a kg, and they may buy some from Australia for $1.5, and they may buy some from Europe, somewhere else for $5 a kg. It doesn't matter, because the portfolio will be secure. That's what's important. So in our analysis, Pakistan has the resources to actually become a legit supplier of these molecules to the region. So ये तो हमारी regional बात है. As far as the Pakistani market is concerned, we have looked at it. We are trying to understand it. We would like to work much more closely with the government of Pakistan, with Sardar Saab's outfit, NICA, and other the ministries involved, climate change, petroleum, etc., and energy, whereby we feel that we can receive some of the support and facilitation that investors like us would require to produce these molecules competitively. That's the idea. We need to be competitive producers. And so whereas the resources are all good, but competition would require that we become more efficient and more cost effective in our production. My final point is that customization and the application of these molecules within Pakistan requires a strategy, requires policy, requires customization, and the ability for the government of Pakistan to mobilize the adaptation. No one is going to adapt to green molecules just like that, because there's a green premium. And investors, businesses, industry will know, whether it's an industry in Pakistan or India or America or Europe or wherever it is, you need government legislation to ensure that this adaptation takes place. And for that, obviously, the infrastructure will need to adapt. For that, policy will need to become such that this adaptation is enforced. For that, some kind of support will need to come through from the government in order for this transition to take place. So we believe that the market will not mature, but develop in Pakistan. But maybe it's a bit too early for us to call that, an investment case. But we have already had dialogues with stakeholders and entities in Pakistan, and we continue to do so. And, we are open for further dialogue and collaboration on that front. Happy to answer any other question. but I believe that would probably set the scene of where we are at. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Naheed Memon, for highlighting the significance of the regulatory and policy support that is needed at that time. And also you highlighted the opportunity of CBAM, carbon border adjustment mechanism, that could also be an opportunity if a low carbon fuel could come into the industrial sector, and bankability projects of the sector as well. With taking the prospect of regulatory or policy support, I would I need to highlight or look into the prospect of Amreli Steel, that what gaps you think are currently exist when there is no regulatory or policy support, and how you can bridge these gaps for the steel sector specifically.
Thank you. I agree with some points of Sardar Saab. I think he has left for some other meeting. There are obviously many challenges with respect to policies and frameworks, but one thing I think to highlight is the most important thing for any project, because he is discussing about the viability and feasibility, is the cost of capital. And first, I will only talk about the current situation in Pakistan. कि आज तो industry पे अगर हम बात करेंगे यार, we have to do something maybe for any project. This is not the right time, I think, if we are very open for the discussion, that today the cost of capital is very high. One thing, if we want to do any project, obviously previously, as we see, SBP has some special scheme for renewables like 6% interest rate. So maybe for any project we want to move with respect to hydrogen, batteries, or anything that can support the decarbonization agenda, we have to give some good investment on some good rates, first thing. And second thing, today the demand in Pakistan is itself, the GDP rate and demand is declining, and even the industries is not running on their full potential as well. So obviously this is not the right time for the investments, but for the future, I think we have to draw some boundaries for each industry. That what we are seeing, like जैसे हम बात करेंगे, अगर एक स्टील इंडस्ट्री है और वो ओवरऑल वो स्टील इंडस्ट्री जो है वो 1000 टन कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड एमिट करती है, फॉर एग्जांपल. सो हमें उसमें we have to draw some path that, okay, in 5 years we have to reduce this 1000 to 800, then in next 5 years we have to reduce this to 600. And for that, what paths are there? Maybe hydrogen is more feasible, maybe solar is more feasible, maybe something else. मतलब इकोनॉमिक्स में हर चीज को हमें डिजाइन करना पड़ेगा, और उसमें जहाँ पे हाइड्रोजन बेस्ट फिट होगा वहां पे हमें उसके ऊपर प्रोजेक्ट्स हम कर सकते हैं. बट इसमें जो एक चीज उन्होंने हाईलाइट की कि हमारे पास एक ओवरऑल पूरे के पूरी वैल्यू चेन अगर हमारे पास हो, जैसे यहाँ पे डिस्कस हुआ कि एक सीमेंट सेक्टर में अगर हमें करना है तो हमें 2000-4000 इलेक्ट्रोलाइजर चाहिए, तो उन्होंने कहा कि यार वैल्यू चेन अगर यहाँ पे हो तो हम कर सकते हैं. तो इस पे सबसे बड़ा एक क्वेश्चन यही है कि आज तक हम सोलर की वैल्यू चेन नहीं बना सके, जो कि इतनी बड़ी इंडस्ट्री यहाँ पे बन चुकी है. तो सबसे पहले तो हमें उन चीजों की वैल्यू चेन बना लेनी चाहिए जिसका आज यहाँ पाकिस्तान में डिमांड है. हम यहाँ पे सोलर पैनल नहीं बना सके, हम यहाँ पे इन्वर्टर नहीं बना सके, और वी आर थिंकिंग कि हम इलेक्ट्रोलाइजर्स बनाएंगे. सो बनाना चाहिए, इस पे कोई दो राय नहीं है. पूरी वैल्यू चेन यहाँ पे होनी चाहिए प्रोजेक्ट्स करने के लिए. बट व्हाट इज द रियलिटी चेक, हमने पिछले कुछ सालों में किन चीजों की वैल्यू चेन पाकिस्तान में बना ली है आज तक? तो ये कि रियलिटी में रहना मेरा ख्याल है कि ज्यादा बेहतर है. दुनिया बिल्कुल मूव कर रही है, डेवलप कंट्रीज के ऊपर पुश हमसे बहुत ज्यादा है, बट वहां पे भी जो रियल चैलेंज है, जो कि मैं पहले अभी बात कर रहे थे, नाहीद मेमन साहब साहिबा एग्जिट कर गई है, और सरदार साहब पहले ये कह गए थे कि ओरेकल पावर का प्रोजेक्ट कमिश्निंग में है. वो ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है. ओरेकल पावर का प्रोजेक्ट तो जहां तक मेरी नॉलेज है वो तो स्टार्ट भी नहीं हुआ. और जो उन्होंने अभी बात भी की कि नाहीद मेमन साहिबा ने, कि हमारे अभी भी कुछ डिस्कशंस चल रही हैं और आप किसको बेचेंगे. अब इसमें रियल चैलेंज ये है कि आज अगर आप $1 पर केजी पे जनरेशन करना भी स्टार्ट कर दो, मतलब नाउ योर रेट्स आर इक्वल, बट स्टिल जो ट्रांसपोर्टेशन कॉस्ट है उससे कहीं ज्यादा हाई है। अगर मैं $1 पे वो कर लूं और $4 की उसके ऊपर पर केजी की अगर मेरी ट्रांसपोर्टेशन आ जाएगी, तो फिर अगेन $5 to $6 पे चली जाएगी। तो आई थिंक जो सबसे राइट फिट है वो ये है कि जो कि हम ग्रे हाइड्रोजन को रिप्लेस करें इससे, मतलब जो ऑलरेडी हाइड्रोजन प्रोसेसेस में यूज होती है वो आपको लाजमी फर्टिलाइजर सेक्टर और मतलब अमोनिया और इन सारे सेक्टर्स में चाहिए, वहां पे रिप्लेस करना मेरा ख्याल है सबसे ज्यादा वायबल है और इकोनॉमिकल है। और हमें अगले 10 सालों में मेरा ख्याल है कि हमें पाथ्स क्लियर होने चाहिए कि कहाँ पे क्या चीज यूज होगी। तो मतलब देयर आर जिसे कहते हैं कि सम कंट्रोवर्सीज एज वेल, कि मतलब अगर आप सिर्फ जिसे कह लें कि आपकी सारी उम्मीदें अगर सिर्फ हाइड्रोजन से जुड़ी होंगी, तो आई थिंक उसके अंदर डिसअपॉइंटमेंट्स बहुत आएंगी इन फ्यूचर। बट ऑब्वियसली वी हैव डिफरेंट पाथ्स जिसपे हम बात कर रहे हैं कि रिन्यूएबल भी है, हाइड्रोजन भी है, बैटरी स्टोरेज भी है। तो इस तरह की जब डिफरेंट चीजें सारी मिलेंगी तो मेरा ख्याल है तमाम टेक्नोलॉजी का जो बेस्ट फिट होगा वो आपको नेट जीरो की तरफ लाने में बेहतरी करेगा। मतलब जस्ट एज एन एग्जाम्पल अगर मैं आपको एक इलेक्ट्रिसिटी प्रोडक्शन की एक एफिशिएंसी की हम बात करें कि आज अगर मैं बिजली मींस मैं ये सोचूं कि जो मेरे रिन्यूएबल की एनर्जी है जैसे हम कर्टेल कर रहे हैं एंड इट्स फ्री, आई एम एज्यूमिंग दिस यूनिट इज फ्री बिकॉज वी आर कर्टेलिंग इट। सो अगर उससे मैं हाइड्रोजन बनाता हूँ और आपके पास जो है वो एक बहुत ही एफिशिएंट किस्म की इलेक्ट्रोलाइजर आपके पास लगा हुआ है, तो इट विल बी एफिशिएंसी विल बी अराउंड 60 to 70%। और फिर आप उसे स्टोर करते हैं, वहां पे आपकी एफिशिएंसी तकरीबन 90% है। और फिर उसे आप रीयूज करके जब इलेक्ट्रिसिटी जनरेट करते हैं टरबाइंस में या इंजन में, तो दिस एफिशिएंसी इज अराउंड 50%। और इस पूरे प्रोसेस की एफिशिएंसी कितनी बनेगी? तकरीबन 30%। मतलब अगर आप इन सबको मल्टीप्लाई करते हैं 30%, मतलब यू आर प्रोड्यूसिंग इलेक्ट्रिसिटी फ्रॉम हाइड्रोजन विद ओनली 30%। सो मतलब इस तरह के बहुत सी चीजें हैं जिसको हमें देखना है। बट ऑब्वियसली द मेन चैलेंज कि हमारे पास वो फ्रेमवर्क, वो पॉलिसीज की क्लैरिटी पाकिस्तान में हमें सोलर और विंड में आज तक नहीं मिल सकी, इसके अंदर भी मिलनी चाहिए। तो सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज है ये। तो मतलब बिल्कुल राइट फिट है कि ये जब तक आप पाकिस्तान में किसी भी चीज के ऊपर, चाहे वो डीकार्बोनाइजेशन हो, चाहे आपने अपनी एनडीसी अचीव करनी हो, चाहे आपने कार्बन मार्केट्स डेवलप करनी हो, मतलब एनीथिंग यू
Yes,
वांट,
yes,
तो उस पे बहुत
Ismail
इंपॉर्टेंट है।
sir, there's a lot of
Okay,
curiosity
thank you, no problem.
among the industrial sector. So I think there is audience as well. They also have so much curious
Sure.
on these issues as well. And I would, the floor is open for the audience if they wanted to ask the questions to our worthy panelists. Yeah, please.
One comment. So just because energy जो net zero है, I'm Dr. Majid from USP Casinest. Net zero basically we are setting the target for the net zero. अब net zero में it's a very important कि हमने, मुझे last 10 years हो गए energy sector में काम करते, तो ये first time ऐसा हो रहा है कि हम green hydrogen की हमने बात करना start कर दी है। तो I think in the back days में हम लोगों ने on the lab scale we have developed such kind of models where green hydrogen can be generated, और उसको डिफरेंट मेथड्स हैं, वाटर स्प्लिटिंग है और फिर बायोमास और बाकी चीज़ों से कर सकते हैं। और हम लोग ये सोच रहे हैं कि हम लोग जो रिन्यूएबल के अंदर सोलर और विंड दोनों इंटरमीडिएट हैं, तो उसके अंदर एक ऐसा कंपोनेंट हम ऐड करें ताकि हमारा जो स्पेक्ट्रम है थोड़ा सा बड़ा हो जाए। बट द प्रॉब्लम इज दैट द हाउ वी कैन डेवलप दिस इको होल सिस्टम। उसके अंदर जनरेशन है, जैसे इलेक्ट्रोलाइजर है, स्टोरेज सबसे बड़ा, इसके अंदर सबसे बड़ा जो चैलेंज है हाइड्रोजन के अंदर वो स्टोरेज का है। ट्रांसपोर्टेशन तो बाद में करेंगे, लेकिन स्टोरेज इज द मेन मेजर इशू, हाउ वी कैन स्टोर दैट हाइड्रोजन इन देयर। तो उसमें जो इकोसिस्टम है उसके अंदर फिर हमें जो है वो चैलेंज, जो डॉक्टर इब्रार साहब ने जो है जो उन्होंने कहा बिल्कुल सही कहा, बिकॉज वी हैव मिस द ट्रेन जो कि पीवी इंडस्ट्री थी, और हमने बैक इन 30 years पहले हमने सोलर सेल बना लिया था लैब स्केल, बट उसको हम इंडस्ट्री में लेके नहीं आ सके कि हम उसकी इंडस्ट्री नहीं लगा सके। और इस वक्त हम सारा का सारा जो पोटेंशियल है सोलर का, वो हम सारा का सारा बिल्स इंपोर्ट पे डाल रहे हैं, हम सोलर पीवी इंपोर्ट कर रहे हैं। सेकंड, बैटरीज की मार्केट में आना शुरू है, बैटरीज भी बाहर से इंपोर्ट है, फिर ईवी की आ गई, और ईवीज भी हमने बाहर से हमने इंपोर्ट करना शुरू हो गई। अब अगले 10 years के अंदर वी आर टारगेटिंग जिसके अंदर हमारा, अगर हम देखें तो एमिशंस नहीं है, तो वाई वी आर सेटिंग कि हम लोग ग्रीन की तरफ मूव करें, और इतना इको सिस्टम फ्रॉम जीरो स्क्रैच टू दैट सिस्टम तो कितना मुश्किल हो जाएगा। करंटली अगर आप देखें पाकिस्तान के अंदर जो हमारी नेचुरल गैस डिप्लीट कर रही है, वी आर मूविंग टुवर्ड्स एलएनजी, तो लेकिन उसके अंदर भी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर ही नहीं है। तो वो जो इकोसिस्टम है होल वी हैव टू सी कि उसकी जो लाइफ साइकिल असेसमेंट है वो किस तरह होगी, और अगले 10 ईयर्स के क्या हमारी मार्केट रेडी भी है, क्या हमारे लोग जो जिन्होंने ये चीज़ें यूज़ करनी सिस्टम वो भी हैं इसको यूज़ करने के लिए। आई थिंक इट्स अ वेरी गुड कि ये फोरम स्टार्ट हुआ, कि डिस्कशन स्टार्ट हुई आफ्टर 10 ईयर्स। मैं खुद देख रहा हूँ कि ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन पे लोगों ने बात करना शुरू की, बिकॉज अगर नेट जीरो की बात करनी तो हमें सोलर के साथ प्लस विंड के साथ, हमें फ्यूल सेल के साथ, हमें बाकी चीज़ों में हमें बात करनी पड़ेगी, तब अदरवाइज वी कैन नॉट फुली मूव टुवर्ड्स नेट जीरो। सो आई थिंक हमें जो इसकी इकोनॉमिक्स है इसको देखना पड़ेगा, और हमें जो प्रायोरिटाइज करना पड़ेगा बीइंग एज अ नेशन, हमारे अपने मसले के हैं, बिकॉज हम पीवी और बैटरीज की तो हम लोग अभी उसको फिगर आउट नहीं, बिकॉज सारा का सारा हमारा इम्पोर्ट है। तो क्या हम लोग जब ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन में जाते हैं तो दोबारा हम क्या उसको इम्पोर्ट पे ही रिलाय करेंगे, आइदर वी कैन मूव। तो जो बार साहब का कमेंट था कि बड़ा अच्छा था कि हम वेदर के हम उस पर जाएं, हम अपने जो सिस्टम डेवलप्ड हैं उनके अंदर मॉडिफिकेशन ला के उसके अंदर किसी तरीके से हम कुछ परसेंटेज हम अपनी एडजस्ट कर लें, और जो CO2 इमिशन 10% जो इस इंडस्ट्री से हो रहा है उसको हम रिड्यूस करके 7-6% पे ला सकते हैं। आई थिंक इज वन ऑफ दी, आई थिंक मेरे ख्याल में अगर हम ये कर लिए अचीव, तो आई थिंक मेरे ख्याल में उस पूरे लाइफ साइकिल को हमें डेवलप करने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी, रादर कि हम उस सिस्टम जो बने हुए हैं उनको जो है वो इम्प्रूव कर लीजिए। थैंक यू।
मैं एक छोटा सा कमेंट, या देखिए अच्छा था कि इफ मिस्टर डॉक्टर सरदार वुड हैव बीन हियर बिकॉज ही इज फ्रॉम द गवर्नमेंट, कि जो हमने कायदे आज़म सोलर पार्क इस्टेब्लिश किया है सिंस 2010, ठीक है ना, वो 1000 मेगावाट्स का पावर प्लांट था, लेकिन स्टिल इट इज़ एट 50%, वो 1000 मेगावाट्स अभी तक पूरे नहीं हुए। सेकेंडली, हाउ डिड वी अराइव एट दिस पॉइंट कि हाइड्रोजन एनर्जी जो है ना, वो वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट दिस इंटरनेशनली, पाकिस्तान की नहीं मैं बात कर रहा। आपने देखा था कि जो स्कैंडिनेवियन कंट्रीज थे ना, दे ऑल हैड विंड पावर, ऑफशोर विंड पावर, एंड दैट वाज सरप्लस, ठीक है ना। सो इनिशियली दे स्टार्टेड दिस हाइड्रोजन एनर्जी स्टार्टेड फ्रॉम दैट पॉइंट कि जब उनके पास सरप्लस पावर है विच दे कैन नॉट कंज्यूम और दे कैन नॉट स्टोर, ठीक है ना, तो दे थॉट ऑफ दिस थिंग दैट दे शुड बी, इट शुड बी कन्वर्टेड इनटू हाइड्रोजन एंड फाइनली टू मीथेन, ठीक है ना। अब हम क्या चीज कर रहे हैं, वी आर स्टेपिंग ऑन द फिफ्थ स्टेप विदाउट बीइंग ऑन द इंटरमीडिएट स्टेप्स, ठीक है ना। तो हमें पहले तो वो विंड पावर, वो सोलर पावर प्लांट्स लगाए ना, ठीक है, उसको जो ऑलरेडी पाइपलाइन है उनको तो लगा लें, ठीक है ना। फिर जब हमारे पास सरप्लस होगी वी कैन कंटिन्यू विद हाइड्रोजन एनर्जी, ठीक है ना। और दूसरी चीज ये जो मैंने इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की भी पहले बात की थी ना, अगर अनलेस यू हैव ऑन साइट हाइड्रोजन प्रोडक्शन, ठीक है ना, ये हार्ड टू अबेट स्टील इंडस्ट्री या सीमेंट इंडस्ट्री यहाँ पे आप कहीं पे इस्तेमाल नहीं कर सकेंगे, ठीक है। आपको जिस तरह इफेक्टो सीमेंट है यहाँ पे टर्नॉल के पास है, ठीक है, उन्होंने लगाया हुआ सोलर पावर प्लांट, ठीक है, लेकिन इट इज नॉट एनफ कि जो उनकी डेली की 450 टन्स ऑफ कोल जो है ना वो कर सके। तो यू हैव टू प्रोड्यूस इट समवेयर देन ट्रांसपोर्ट इट, और जो आपका ट्रांसमिशन और डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सिस्टम है ना, तो वो वी कैन नॉट डेवलप दैट थिंग। तो आप जो पाकिस्तान में कर सकते हैं वो ये कर सकते हैं कि हाइड्रोजन फॉर एक्सपोर्ट, यानी कि आपके पास कोस्टल लाइन बहुत बड़ी है, ठीक है ना, आप वहां पे जनरेट करें थ्रू विंड पावर या थ्रू सोलर पावर या टाइडल पावर, और उसको एक्सपोर्ट करें। फिर ग्रेजुअली जब आपका इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलप होगा तो यू कैन मूव इनवर्ड्स। सो दैट इज माय टेक।
Yes, wonderful comments and suggestions. I would request Basit, he's from the renewables first. They are also doing sort of study on hydrogen. So what he adds on and what's his comments on that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Saleh. I'll keep it brief. First of all, it's a good discussion to have, and I think the good part is that we see a lot of skepticism about hydrogen and as well as hopefulness. So I think दोनों चीजें जो है वो बहुत जरूरी हैं इसमें. We can't go all in as multiple speakers mentioned. देखिए, first thing we need to understand is this green hydrogen. When we are saying for hard to abate sector, it's because it's a technology of last resort. You can't go towards other technologies, then it makes sense. जैसे अबू बकर अभी बता रहे थे स्टील का, इलेक्ट्रिक फर्नेस का, डेफिनेटली इफ यू नो यू हैव एक सिंपल सी वो फिजिक्स की इक्वेशन है ना, अगर आप डायरेक्टली इलेक्ट्रिसिटी प्रोड्यूस करके कर सकते हो, व्हाई यू नीड टू प्रोड्यूस एन इंटरमीडिएट फ्यूल. सो आई थिंक फर्स्ट थिंग वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड इट्स अ टेक्नोलॉजी ऑफ लास्ट रिजोर्ट, शुड बी फोकस्ड ऑन एरियाज जहाँ पे आपके पास डायरेक्ट इलेक्ट्रिफिकेशन के ऑल्टरनेटिव्स नहीं है. अच्छा, जो हम इसे टेक्नोलॉजी ऑफ लास्ट रिजोर्ट कहते हैं, दो मेजर इश्यूज हैं. द रीज़न इट्स नॉट commercially bankable कह लें, या it's not matured right now. One is infrastructure which is required, जिसकी अभी डॉक्टर साहब ने भी बात की, and the second is the cost. अब पहले cost पे आ जाते हैं. Cost अभी definitely it's too expensive, but अब अभी global trends if you go through it, globally आपके पास, in fact we just did a study, we modeled the cost based on imported electrolyzer cost. तो वो आपके पास अगर 2030, 2040, अगर 2050 तक जब आप नेट जीरो सिनेरियोस जब भी आप लॉन्च करते हैं, सो आपकी कॉस्ट कम्स डाउन टू एट द सेम लेवल अबाउट USD 2 and less than $2 per kg फॉर ग्रीन इलेक्ट्रोलाइजर. राइट नाउ ये अभी 6 है, उसमें ट्रांसपोर्टेशन 3 and 4 ऐड कर लें तो इट गोज अबाउट $8 to $9. सो कॉस्ट राइट नाउ इट्स नॉट बैंकेबल. इवन आप इतना सब्सिडी का क्वांटम भी नहीं दे सकते, आप कोई फाइनेंशियल इंस्ट्रूमेंट भी नहीं अप्लाई कर सकते राइट नाउ. बट दो चीज़ें हैं, इट विल हैपन इन द फ्यूचर. सो व्हेन द कॉस्ट कम्स डाउन, that is not the right time that you start thinking of developing the ecosystem. The ecosystem needs to be developed today. Second is the export industry. जो एक्सपोर्ट इंडस्ट्री है वहाँ पे आपकी जो कॉस्ट कम्पिटिटिवनेस है वो बड़ी डिफरेंट है. I can give you an example. I mean, there are a lot of developments जो globally अभी already हो रही हैं, including Global H2 Foundation. They have already started the auctions in regarding this. So they are subsidizing the premium, जो green premium की मिस नाहिद बात कर रही थी, वो green premium जो है they are already providing this as part of the concessional financing instrument. So you can compete globally right now, I think, which is essentially what Oracle is trying to do. अच्छा, now अब आ जाते हैं फोकस किन सेक्टर्स पे करना चाहिए. फोकस में देखें, दिस इज ऑलरेडी बीन एस्टेब्लिश्ड अबाउट, हम कहते हैं पावर 2x प्रोडक्ट्स, यानी कि जो ग्रीन मॉलिक्यूल्स हैं अदर देन द ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन, जो आप उसके सब्सिक्वेंट मॉलिक्यूल्स बना सकते हैं विच आर इजी टू एप्लीकेबल, आप उन पे फोकस करें. एंड आई वुड फोकस ऑन दिस वन सेक्टर पाकिस्तान के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, विच इज आई थिंक द फर्टिलाइजर. 2-3 दफ़ा नाम उसका डिस्कशन में आया था बट वी डिडंट फोकस मच इनफ. अच्छा, दिस इज आई थिंक अगर हम डोमेस्टिक अदर देन द एक्सपोर्ट इंडस्ट्री की, दिस कुड बी द स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट. जो स्टेप्स की बात कर रहे थे, आई थिंक दिस कुड बी द फर्स्ट स्टेप. एंड रीजन उसका है, इट्स नॉट जस्ट अबाउट गोइंग टुवर्ड्स नेट जीरो, बिकॉज हमारे अनफॉर्चुनेटली प्रायोरिटी लिस्ट में जो नेट जीरो क्लाइमेट गोल्स आर वेरी डाउन द लिस्ट, एंड यूजुअली इट्स मोर और लेस अबाउट द कॉस्ट ऑफ इट. आपके पास अबाउट 20 to 15% कंजम्पशन है इस वक्त गैस में फर्टिलाइजर सेक्टर की. एंड आपके पास ऑलरेडी जो गैस है वो यू ऑलरेडी नो उसके क्या हालात चल रहे हैं, रिजर्व्स डिप्लीट हो रहे हैं आपके पास. एज अ रिजल्ट आप RLNG प्राइसिंग में जा रहे हैं. अभी कल परसों की न्यूज़ है आपके जो फर्टिलाइजर सेक्टर की सब्सिडी ख़त्म हो रही है, आपके पास यूरिया के बैग की प्राइस डबल हो जाएगी. सो ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग पॉइंट टूवर्ड्स के अब आपके पास जो कॉस्ट कम्पिटिटिवनेस है दैट इज़ मच मोर सूटेबल राइट नाउ. So I think that that's the starting point where you could focus now. अच्छा, अब going way ahead क्या करना चाहिए, काफ़ी यूजफुल रिकमेंडेशंस आई. आई थिंक फर्स्टली इसमें जो है एक क्लैरिटी ऑफ विजन होनी चाहिए कि हमने किन सेक्टर्स पे फोकस करना है ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन पे. इट्स नॉट अबाउट ब्रिंगिंग इन द ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन फॉर एवरीथिंग बट फॉर स्पेसिफिक सेक्टर्स एंड व्हेन और पोटेंशियली व्हेन. So let's say कि ये हमारे पास low hanging fruits है, यहाँ पे we know there are no other alternatives, so maybe we can bring it. So maybe we start working on export and fertilizer section for now, and as our supply chain is developed, we can explore other sectors as the economies of scale is achieved. Secondly, देखें जो मुअज़्ज़म साहब ने भी बात की थी और अभी आई थिंक वो वैल्यू चेन की बात भी की अबू बकर ने. हमने जो सोलर और विंड की बैंड वैगन मिस की थी ना, जब सारे चल रहे थे इसकी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में अबाउट 10 years ago, 10 to 15 years ago, और अब हम जाते हैं तो अब हमारे पास एक ही वो आता है कि यू कांट कंपेयर विद द कॉस्ट ऑफ पैनल दैट चाइना प्रोड्यूसेस. सो इसकी जो अभी वो इकोसिस्टम है वो ग्लोबली डेवलप स्टार्ट हो रहा है. सो दिस इज़ द राइट टाइम. अगर मैं ये कॉस्ट कंपेटिटिव हो गया इंपोर्ट करके, उस टाइम पे मैं एंटर होऊंगा तो मैं मार्केट में अपने आप को कंपेटिटिव नहीं कर सकता. सो दिस इज द राइट टाइम टू फोकस ऑन. एंड चाइना स्टार्टेड इन 1980s. जब हम उसकी बात करते हैं कि आज 30% उनके पास शेयर है, तो दे स्टार्टेड देयर R&D इन 1980s सोलर के अंदर. दैट्स व्हाई दे हैव द 30% शेयर. सो कंसिडर योरसेल्फ 20-30 years बिफोर इफ यू स्टार्ट योर रिसर्च एंड डेवलपमेंट राइट नाउ. लास्ट पॉइंट आई वांट टू से, खालिद साहब ने भी सेक्टर कपलिंग की बात की, तो उसमें देखिए कुछ एक तो है कि कुछ कंड्यूसिव हमें रेगुलेटरी एनवायरनमेंट बनानी पड़ेगी इसकी, अदर देन जस्ट गिविंग देम फाइनेंसिंग मैकेनिज्म. अभी पिछले दिनों आई थिंक नीका का जो इवेंट था उसमें एंग्रो से उनके आए हुए थे, एंग्रो एनर्जी के प्रेसिडेंट आए हुए थे. तो ही मेंशन कि आप हमारे लिए सिर्फ व्हीलिंग चार्जेस जो है ना उसको आप सूटेबल बना दें CTBCM के, आप वो कर दें, लगाना मेरा काम है. एंड दैट्स व्हाट प्राइवेट सेक्टर डज. It brings in the finance, it brings in the feasibilities, viabilities, वो खुद ही बना देगा जैसे मिस नाहिद भी बना रही है. So I think वो चीज़ करने की ज़रूरत है. Lastly, I think एक चीज हमें भी करने की जरूरत है कि हम लोग सोच रहे हैं अभी भी कि हमने टेक्सटाइल और आईटी इंडस्ट्री ही एक्सपोर्ट करनी है। अगर तो हमने वो ही करनी है तो डेफिनेटली हम फिर एक्सपोर्ट इंडस्ट्री में रहेंगे, बट इफ वी वांट टू लुक बियॉन्ड दैट, हमने ये अपने एसीजीज बनाने हैं, इनको ऑपरेट करने हैं, और अगर हम एक्सपोर्ट इंडस्ट्री में ये सीमेंट, स्टील और इस तरह के प्राइमरी कंस्ट्रक्शन मटेरियल्स को अगर हम एक्सपोर्ट करना चाहते हैं, सो वी विल हैव टू स्विच टुवर्ड्स दिस एज अ फ्यूल. Then we cannot compete through even gray hydrogen or some other kind of coal or whatever the primary energy sources. So I think हमें ये भी realize कर लेना चाहिए कि हमने किस sector को करना है. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think most of the concerns would be addressed when the policy comes in, especially you talked about the sector-specific approach for the hydrogen. I would request all the audience, if they have any questions, they can, the floor is open for them as well. Either I think they understand the concept or not. So it acts in both way. So I guess if any of our other our panelists I would like to highlight something that we missed. So okay. With this, I would, that's a wonderful discussion and wonderful suggestions and comments coming from audience as well as the panelists. And we will keep engaging you in the further sessions as well. And now I would request for the concluding remarks to the head of energy unit, Mr. Roberto Remanzia. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Saleha, and everyone for joining us today. I mean, it was definitely a good discussion. We discussed both of the points, but let me just sort of try to end it on a positive note if there is something as well. Yeah. So I mean, we definitely did understand that we do have a good realization, and there is a strong realization that green hydrogen is actually going to play an important role as we move forward, and not just only in the industrial sector or the hard to abate sector. That was actually the theme of this discussion, but perhaps we also talked about going into different sectors such as transport or other very good sectors were also mentioned here as well. I think Dr. Khalid highlighted, Abu Bakr Saab also mentioned. And Abu Bakr Saab, I think he had just left, but we fully understand your point that we need to have these boundaries. We need to have the scoping of what different sectors do exist. And I think Dr. Sadar was also very right when he actually pointed out that there is need to have a very good cost and benefit analysis as we actually start moving further. So again, firstly, the discourse is definitely developing on the positive end. If we again quickly analyze some of the statistics over the past year, I think Dr. Khalid highlighted some of the declarations that were made at COP28. Some of the indicators, if we even if we look at some of the cost figures, there has been a trend. Definitely, most of them, the speakers as well as our experts highlighted that it is currently not on the par in which we can actually make a very strong economic case. But the technology cost is reducing, the industry alliances are becoming strong. So eventually, the capex reductions and the major equipment cost that is involved is actually going to come down as well. But I think, again, just like what Basit mentioned at the end as well, and with Ms. Nahid Mehman has mentioned as well, that, I mean, there is a cost of being a lagger. I mean, and Pakistan has actually paid a lot of it, not just in this, but in most of the sectors. If we look at, I mean, even we talked about the gas, even perhaps if we go 10 to 12 years back, even LNG made sense, perhaps. So, I mean, we need to make sure that in the whole debate of the economics, we actually keep on doing that. Currently, this thing is not actually making sense. We don't need to miss that ladder as well. Now, when it actually comes to Pakistan, green hydrogen, I think has to play perhaps over a longer run a very important role. But this is exactly where we do have a number of challenges. And I mean, frankly, if you look at the private sector, I mean, definitely the money follows reward. I think both of the private sector were very clear about is today that if we have to transition any of the private sector towards a low carbon development, it has to eventually make a bankable case. It has to actually make a commercial scale. So green hydrogen or any low carbon fuel is actually going to make sense when it starts making a commercial case. So I think that point was actually raised again and again, and this all will actually require very strong policy support, and such support mechanism may be taxations or the frameworks, tariffs, or any of the support mechanisms such as tax removals or on different import equipments, even they currently don't exist. So I think we need to also push on, not perhaps push, but we need to also reconsider on those fronts as well. I think, again, one of the points, I think, just looking at the discussion that happened in the same room, I think 3 days back on the renewable energy end, and the discussion that is actually happening today, there are some of the very areas where we need to sort of collaborate in the context what Basik talked about in sector coupling, that on one hand, we're actually complaining that the wind power plants that have been installed in the Jimpi region of Pakistan, they have been curtailed. I mean, definitely the demand is reducing. There are some of the other reasons as well. So on one hand, we're actually complaining that there's a surplus capacity, and on the other hand, we're actually also discussing what is actually going to be happen with the additional surplus capacity which we do have. So perhaps this is something where the green hydrogen could eventually come up, and this is how the sector coupling can actually play a very important role. So again, looking forward, going forward, I think what we actually need to do, I think the renewables first is there, the academia is there, the CSOs, many of the CSOs are here. We also had colleagues from NUST as well, the Pride as well. So I mean, perhaps we also need to come up with some comparatively much stronger or much broader these scoping analysis and these cost and benefit analysis studies that can actually assist provide even both a short as well as a long run to the government as well. So again, Saleh, there has been a lot of recommendations. The key idea going forward from this point is perhaps let's join hands and rethink the discussion. Is it actually happening because there is a demand for it, or is it actually happening because we have, again, even the CSOs have any vested interest as well? So just I think ending on this point, going back to you, Saleh. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And now, finally, I would request for the vote of thanks to our research fellow, Dr. Khalid Waleed. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for insightful discussion. Quoting Basit, कि हमने वो doubts भी mention कर दिए हैं और हमने potentials भी mention कर दिए हैं. So, being Center of Excellence on Sustainable Development Policy Research, SDPI will keep on exploring these futuristic, pragmatist sort of measures, क्योंकि futuristic हैं. And one thing I would like to mention here is कि what if economic bankability and feasibility is linked with environmental feasibility, or environment के साथ सारा कुछ link हो रहा है macroeconomics, then we would be making sense of these sort of initiatives. With this, I would like to say thank you everyone for joining us. We will keep on organizing such events. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.